The air in the cold, dark halls of the Crystal Empire was thick with the crushing silence. Only the far-off howl of the snowstorm outside dared to break the stillness, but its sound was distant, almost like a fading memory. Twilight Sparkle's every step felt heavier as she walked deeper into the shadows of King Sombra's forsaken castle. Her wings, once vibrant and majestic, fluttered weakly behind her now. Their once pristine feathers, now ragged and dulled from endless days of captivity. They no longer carried the weight of hope, but that of a world long abandoned. Twilight had changed, irrevocably so. The gleam of her royal status as an alicorn was still present in form, but the alicorn of friendship, the one who had once flown joyfully with her friends, the beacon of light in the darkest of times, was gone. In her place stood a broken shadow of the mare she used to be, stripped of her former glory, both inside and out. King Sombra had seen to it. He had made her his prisoner, his plaything, his broken prize. The air in his castle was thick with the stench of his dark magic, hanging in the atmosphere like a foul miasma. The obsidian walls pulsed with an unnatural life of their own, crawling with dark energies, as though the very stones of the castle breathed with malicious intent. Twilight could feel the weight of his presence, an ever-watchful, oppressive force that gnawed at her very soul. Those crimson eyes, burning with malice and power, were never far from her mind. They haunted her dreams and tainted her every waking moment. She had never feared him before. Not when she first learned of his return, not when she thought her friends, her magic, and the collective will of Equestria would be enough to defeat him. But now she was trapped. The world beyond the Crystal Empire felt as unreachable as the stars themselves. Her friend had tried to save her. They fought valiantly, but their efforts had crumbled like dust before the overwhelming power of the King Sombra. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. With each passing moment, she felt her resolve and spirit weather. Her once bright coat, once the very embodiment of magic and friendship, now seemed dull and faded, as if drained by the oppressive air of the cursed castle. Her eyes, once filled with wonder and curiosity, now stared blankly at the empty corridors, the weight of hopelessness pressing on her heart. Her thoughts became muddy, her sense of self fraying at the edges. But what frightened her more than the isolation, more than the crushing despair, was the temptation. She could feel it, like a spider's web woven into her very soul, delicate and insidious. The call of his dark power was always there, just beneath the surface. King Sombra was no fool. He knew how to manipulate, how to bend the will of others. And Twilight had felt it, over and over, his attempts to break her, to mold her into something dark, something his. Each time he whispered in her ear, offering her freedom from the suffocating weight of her mortality, from the constant ache of defiance, she resisted. But each time she could feel it, a pull, a whispering voice coaxing her to yield, to embrace the power she could feel surging through her veins like poison and fire. At night, when the darkness was deepest, his voice would come, soft, insistent, seductive. He promised an end to the agony, an end to the fight. He promised power, power to rule, to dominate. But still, Twilight resisted. She fought against it, even when it became harder to remember why she fought. The magic of her past seemed so distant now, as though it were slipping away like water through her hooves. How long could she last, she wondered. How long before she too would become a part of his darkness? The throne room loomed ahead, cold and imposing. The obsidian throne sat like a jagged shadow, its dim surface gleaming in the dim, sickly green glow that pulsed from the cursed crystal lining in the walls. King Sombra was there, as always, his presence like a looming storm, a weight that crushed the very air. He sat upon his throne, his form like a spectre, his coat as black as the obsidian, his eyes gleaming with malice and hunger. His horn crackled with violent magic, a faint glow that twisted the air around him. Twilight stood there, her wings drawn tight against her body, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. His gaze was piercing, sharp enough to slice through her very being. His eyes were the only thing that mattered in this room, the only thing that saw her, truly saw her.
Twilight sparkle.
His voice rasped, smooth and chilling like the scraping of ice across stone.
You seem broken, tired.
Her heart thundered in her chest as she fought to keep her voice steady. I will never join you, Sombra. I will never bow to you. He chuckled, a sound that rumbled like thunder, dark and full of terrible promise.
But you already have no princess. Don't you see? The fight isn't over. You're already mine.
His words slithered through her mind like a cold, poisonous vine constricting around her. Twilight's breath caught in her throat as his power began to coil around her like an invisible serpent, winding tighter and tighter. Her wings ached from the strain, but she refused to let herself give in, to let him see the cracks in her resolve. She would not, could not, allow him that satisfaction. He rose from his throne. The room seemed to grow colder still, the air thick with darkness. He moved toward her, every step soundless, like the approach of death itself. His eyes were hungry, predatory, devouring. There was no escape from his gaze.
You think your defiance is some great victory?
He sneered, his voice low and venomous.
But defiance means nothing when you're trapped in a cage of your own making. How long do you think you can fight it, Twilight? How long before the darkness swallows you whole?
Twilight staggered back as his magic swirled around her, cold and suffocating. She could feel it, pulling her, pressing her, like chains wrapping around her chest. She struggled, but it was like fighting against the tide. The more she fought, the more the darkness closed in, until she could barely breathe. King Sombra's hooves were inches from her, his gaze never leaving hers. His voice dropped to a whisper, soft and dangerous.
You are the key, Twilight Sparkle. Your magic, your potential. Together, we could rule all of Equestria. No more weakness, no more light, only power.
His words seeped into her soul like poison, a temptation too great to ignore. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear and desire. What would it be like, she wondered, to give in? To embrace the power that pulses beneath her skin, that could end the pain, end the endless war within her heart? For a moment, she almost gave in. Almost. But then, something inside her snapped. The magic within her surged, wild, untamed, unstoppable. Her wings flared, her horn cracked with the blinding light. With a burst of pure, defiant will, she broke free from his hold. She stumbled back, the room pulsing with the raw force of her power. No! She shouted, her voice ringing with defiance, the words echoing through the cold halls. I will never be yours, Sombra. I'll fight you until my last breath. King Sombra's face twisted in fury, his eyes burning brighter, his form shuddering with unbridled rage. But beneath it, there was something darker, something far more dangerous, something that whispered that this battle was far from over.
You can resist all you want, Twilight Sparkle.
He growled.
But mark my words, one day you will come to me, and when you do, there will be no escape.
As she turned away, her heart heavy with dread, Twilight realized that she was no longer just a prisoner in his castle. She was a piece on a chessboard, a pawn in a game where the stakes were her very soul. The darkness, though still distant, was ever looming, waiting to claim her. And as the shadow of King Sombra loomed over her, Twilight knew one truth. The battle for her soul had only just begun. The end of Part 1. Hey guys, if you listen to this, thank you so much. Me and my brother decided to make this for fun, and we honestly are not expecting it to go anywhere. So if you did watch it, please leave a comment and maybe a like. Thanks. Goodbye.
Subscribe too.